Time to check in with David Heurtel, filling in today for Rudy Husney. Appreciate that, David. And our feature is brought to you by Guaranteed Industries, Guaranteed and Can Air, teaming up for all your heating and air conditioning needs. You can always reach them, 514-342-3400, or go online for more details, guaranteedindustries.com, serving Montrealers since 1957. David, I want to just start with something that I used as my question of the day today. This recommendation now by the committee, 290-page report, 50 recommendations, including extending Bill 21 into daycares. I just want to try to understand. I think I know if you heard what I was saying, but to me, this doesn't make any sense at all. It's already in educational institutions. Why are we dragging it into daycare? But remember, and I point out again, the government will decide. These are not, now they're not nailed down. The government will look at this and decide what they want to implement and what they don't. But what's your initial reaction?
Well, yet again, when we're talking about identity politics and secularism, this is a solution trying to find a problem. And let's back up a bit. When this was created, and you mentioned this earlier on the show, this is in the wake of the Bedford scandal. There's nothing in these recommendations that are even remotely tied to what actually happened in Bedford school, in the Bedford school, which basically, let's face it, this was about poor governance, union management, just dropping the ball at every turn, opening the door to what happened. And that report, that finding is clear in everything that was investigated afterwards. Now, this is about preparing, and let's try to back it up again. Let's try to forget for a second the Saclic scandal. François Legault knew 6 months ago, a year ago, he wants to run again. And he's preparing this last year in power. And it's all, again, going to be about trying to fight the PQ on identity politics. So this is one piece of it. And remember, there's another big piece that's supposed to come out fairly soon. This government is supposed to propose a Quebec constitution. And so this is all part of a strategy based on identity politics, based on installing fear and division. Again, not in Montreal, where over 70% of the diversity is in this province, but rather in the regions, older, white, regional francophones, and try to fight the PQ on what has basically been the bread and butter of both of these parties for the last few years, inspired, let's face it, inspired by right and far right elements in France, and showing what has worked here in North America and the U.S. with Trump and immigration. And just another example, this summer, I don't know if you're on vacation when that happened, Aaron, but you'll remember Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon coming out publicly out of the blue this summer when there were crime stats released in Montreal and coming out to say, without any factual basis, saying, oh, that's definitely tied to immigration. Mm-hmm. And so this is the battlefield that the CAQ, and this is not new, but the CAQ and François Legault has tried to choose to try to turn the corner and try to have a fighting chance a year from now. But as we know, now everything is paralyzed by the Saclic scandal, which is growing and growing and growing.
Yeah. By the way, for people who don't know, he says he will be there, and that's on Tuesday, I think, right, next week.
Isn't it amazing, though, Aaron? It's almost becoming a carbon copy of the sponsorship scandal. Remember back in 0304, it all started with a Sheila Fraser, who was then the federal Auditor General report. Then the Gomery inquiry just kept on finding out stuff and more stuff and more stuff. We've never seen this in Quebec, Aaron. 5 current or former cabinet minister of a current government and the premier having to testify. Yeah. This is becoming bigger than anybody thought. It has taken all of the oxygen out. You know, he had a rollout plan. He was planning probably to prorogue the session, the parliamentary session, and postpone coming back, having a big inaugural speech, which was going to talk about nationalist themes like identity, like a constitution for Quebec. And now even the big cabinet shuffle was planned for next week, Aaron, and it seems as even that's going to be postponed because the premier is now paralyzed by having to testify at this inquiry. And this is caused by Geneviève Guilbeault's testimony. It's because of that email that became public last Friday when Geneviève Guilbeault testified, when she sent an email to both the premier and his chief of staff, Martin Koskinen, complaining about the situation and his answer to that. And that opened the door to the testimony. So yet again, another self-inflicted wound by this government that just cannot get out of this scandal.
By the way, we will have that testimony, or some of it anyway. We don't know what time that's going to happen on Tuesday. Be able to hear some of that here on CJD. David, let me talk about what's going on with our Canadian delegation, if you will. Mm-hmm. We talked yesterday, Dominic LeBlanc meeting with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Then I heard today we have some Canadian officials meeting with the U.S. Attorney General. What's this about?
Well, this is about, remember, this trade war. One of the reasons for the trade war, you'll remember, was about fentanyl. And this was a theme that was used both against Canada and Mexico. Obviously, the facts don't matter yet again in anything having to do with Donald Trump. As we know, Canada is not a major exporter of fentanyl to the United States, but it is a theme. And so when you're negotiating with Trump, you have to accept his agenda, whether it's based on fact or not. And what we're seeing here now is, and as I said to you on Monday, all the economic indicators are at red right now in Canada. The situation, we're feeling more and more the impact of this trade war. It is hurting average Canadians, it's hurting business, it's hurting our GDP, it's hurting everywhere, and it's going to get worse. And so regardless of how talented Mark Carney and his team are, we're going to have to see some sort of agreement, and so I think this is why you're seeing all this ramp up happening right now.
You know, I asked a question yesterday of Mike Lecouture, the CTV reporter, who's with the Canadian, he's with Dominic LeBlanc and covering those meetings. And I was trying to understand for Canadians who heard Mark Carney say last week that, you know what, no more retaliatory tariffs, they're off board, this will try to get us a deal. And then, of course, Donald Trump acting to saying, you know, I like Mark Carney, good guy, whatever, this will help. What I mean, and I just trying to understand this, the best we can do going forward to get any sorts of concessions here would be in those sectors, in auto and steel and aluminum. I mean, what else is there left to get?
Well, for Trump, the one other big prize is agriculture. It's dairy, it's meat, it's all those sacred cows, pardon the pun, here in Canada. And so that's something that, you know, government after government, both provincial and federal, have drawn the line on. But I'm sure it's part of the discussion.
Okay.
And let's remember, if deal or not, there's eventually going to be a deal, but it's going to hurt. The EU signed a deal. There's still tariffs. Right now, what did Trump do now with India, going after India, raising tariffs against India, and that's tied obviously to Russia and Ukraine and the oil that is coming from Russia. But anyhow, the idea here is that whatever type of deal that is going to come out of this, it's going to hurt. This is a new world order. We've laughed at Donald Trump and the whole taco thing, but at the end of the day, there are more tariffs than not in the world. And so it would be very difficult to see Canada come out with a deal being totally unscathed and going back to how things were a year and a half ago.
So expect the worst, hope for the best.
Well, I think when you make a deal, there's going to be some forms of concessions. And I think that ultimately we're going to have to understand that life is going to have to be more expensive and more difficult for our businesses moving forward.
David, appreciate you jumping in today. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Aaron.
Take care.